Richard Thornton stared at his reflection in the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse apartment. Behind him, the Christmas tree stood perfectly decorated, not a single ornament out of place. A professional decorator had arranged everything 3 weeks ago. The tree was beautiful, he supposed, but something about its perfection made him feel even more alone. It was Christmas Eve, and the silence in his apartment was so complete that he could hear the soft hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen 40 feet away. Outside, Manhattan glittered with a million lights. Somewhere down there, families were gathering. Friends were laughing. People were together, and here he was, 52 years old, sitting on a leather couch that cost more than most people's cars, holding a glass of champagne that probably cost more than most people's weekly groceries. He took a sip. It tasted like expensive grapes and disappointment. Richard stood up and walked to the window, pressing his hand against the cold glass. He could see his breath fog up a small circle on the surface. Down below, a couple walked hand in hand through the snow that had started falling an hour ago. They were laughing about something. He wondered what it felt like to have someone to laugh with on Christmas Eve. His phone sat on the marble coffee table, dark and silent. No calls, no messages. Well, there were messages, but they were all automated holiday greetings from businesses. Happy holidays from your dental office. Season's greetings from Premier Auto Service. Even the spam calls had stopped for Christmas. He picked up the phone anyway and scrolled through his contacts. The list was long. Hundreds of names. Business associates, former colleagues, people he'd worked with over the years. But as he scrolled through them, he realized something that made his chest feel tight. He couldn't think of a single person on that list who would want to hear from him today. Not because they were busy with their own families, though they probably were, but because somewhere along the way he'd stopped being the kind of person people wanted to spend time with. Richard set the phone down and walked to his home office. On the wall hung his achievements: Harvard Business School diploma, Forbes magazine covers, photos of him shaking hands with important people at important events, awards from business organizations. He'd built a tech company from nothing and turned it into a billion-dollar empire. At cocktail parties, people called him a genius. At conferences, he was the keynote speaker everyone wanted to hear, but there were no personal photos on that wall. No pictures of friends. No casual snapshots from vacations or birthday parties. He returned to the living room and sat down again. The champagne had gone flat. He poured it down the sink and opened a bottle of scotch instead. The expensive kind that came in a wooden box. The kind you save for special occasions. What could be more special than spending Christmas Eve alone in a penthouse worth $12 million? His ex-wife Catherine was probably with her new husband in Connecticut. They'd been divorced for 5 years now. She'd tried to make it work. He had to give her that. But he'd been too busy building his empire. Too many late nights at the office. Too many missed dinners. Too many broken promises about making more time. When she finally left, she'd said something that still echoed in his head sometimes. "Richard, you've become successful at everything except being a person." He'd been angry at the time. Called her dramatic. Told himself she just didn't understand the pressures of running a major company. But sitting here now with nothing but expensive furniture and expensive silence, he wondered if maybe she'd been right. His son David was 30 now, living in London with his family. Richard had gotten a brief video message from him yesterday. David's 2 kids, Richard's grandchildren, waved at the camera while David said something polite about hoping he was doing well. They might as well have been strangers. And whose fault was that? Richard had missed most of David's childhood, buried in work. Now his son sent him polite video messages like you'd send to a distant relative you barely knew. His daughter Lisa was 27, somewhere in Australia on an extended trip with her boyfriend. She'd sent a text message: "Merry Christmas, Dad. Hope you're good." 3 sentences, an exclamation point that felt more like punctuation than enthusiasm. No phone call, no invitation to visit, just 3 sentences and a generic holiday emoji. Richard walked to the window again. The snow was falling harder now, covering the city in white. It was beautiful in that postcard kind of way, but beauty feels different when you're alone. It feels like something happening outside the window of your life instead of inside it. He thought about calling someone, but who? His executive assistant was with her family in Ohio. His chief operating officer had flown to Mexico with his wife. The board members were all celebrating with their loved ones. And even if they weren't, what would he say? Hi, it's your boss. Want to spend Christmas Eve with me because I have no one else? The truth was harder than he wanted to admit. He didn't have friends anymore. He had contacts. He had professional relationships. He had people who wanted things from him, or wanted to impress him, or wanted to do business with him. But friends, people who cared about him as a person and not as a business opportunity, those had disappeared somewhere along the way. He tried to remember when it happened. When did work stop being something he did and start being all he was? When did he stop accepting invitations to casual dinners because he was too busy? When did he start canceling plans with old college buddies because a business meeting came up? When did he become the guy who only talked about quarterly earnings and market share? It had been gradual, he supposed. Like watching yourself age in the mirror. You don't notice it day by day, but then one morning you wake up and barely recognize yourself. Richard finished his scotch and poured another. He knew he should probably eat something. The refrigerator was stocked with expensive cheeses and imported delicacies. His housekeeper had made sure he had everything he needed before she left yesterday to spend the holidays with her own family. But the thought of preparing food for one, of sitting at that long dining table alone, made his stomach turn. He walked through the apartment instead, room after empty room. The guest bedrooms that never had guests. The gym where he sometimes ran on a treadmill going nowhere. The second bathroom that no one ever used. All this space, and somehow it felt like he was suffocating. The clock on the wall showed 10:47 p.m. In other homes, families were probably winding down their Christmas Eve celebrations. Kids were being tucked into bed with whispered reminders that Santa was coming. Parents were assembling toys and filling stockings. Couples were sharing a quiet moment together after the chaos of the day, and here he was, counting the minutes until Christmas Eve became Christmas Day, as if changing the date would somehow change how he felt. Richard sat back down on the couch and stared at the perfect Christmas tree. He wondered what it would be like to have a tree that looked imperfect. Ornaments hung by children's hands, decorations with memories attached to them, a star on top that meant something more than just the finishing touch a professional decorator added. He'd gotten everything he'd worked for. The success, the money, the recognition, the corner office with the best view. But somewhere in getting all of that, he'd lost something more important. He'd lost connection. He'd lost belonging. He'd lost the simple human experience of mattering to someone beyond what he could do for them, or give them or teach them about business strategy. Tomorrow was Christmas. He'd wake up in this beautiful, empty apartment. He'd probably go for a run, come back, maybe watch some television. The day would pass like any other day, except everywhere around him, people would be celebrating together. And he would be here, alone with his achievements and his awards and his expensive everything that somehow added up to nothing at all. Richard closed his eyes and listened to the silence. Tomorrow, he decided, he would at least go outside. Take a walk. Maybe the cold air would help clear his head. Maybe being around other people, even strangers, would feel better than sitting in this golden cage he'd built for himself. He didn't know it yet, but that decision to take a walk on Christmas Day would change everything. Richard woke up on Christmas morning to complete silence. For a moment he forgot what day it was, then reality settled in like a weight on his chest. Christmas. The day when being alone felt even lonelier than usual. He lay in bed longer than he normally would, staring at the ceiling. There was no reason to rush, no meetings to attend, no calls to make, no one waiting for him anywhere. The freedom of having nowhere to be felt less like freedom and more like proof of how disconnected he'd become from normal life. Finally, around 9 o'clock, he got up. He made coffee in his expensive espresso machine, the kind that grinds the beans fresh for each cup. It tasted perfect and completely joyless. He stood by the kitchen counter drinking it, looking out at the city covered in fresh snow. The sun was bright, making everything sparkle. He should eat something. The refrigerator was full of food, but the thought of cooking breakfast for himself on Christmas morning felt pathetically sad. Instead, he got dressed in his running clothes. At least if he went outside, he'd be moving. Action felt better than sitting still with his thoughts. The building doorman wished him a Merry Christmas as he left. Richard nodded and said it back, wondering if the doorman felt sorry for him. The guy probably saw him leaving alone on every holiday. What must he think? That the rich CEO in the penthouse had everything except anyone to spend Christmas with? The streets were quieter than normal, but not empty. Families were out, kids bundled up in winter coats pulling new sleds through the snow. Couples walked arm in arm. Groups of friends were heading somewhere together, carrying bags and laughing about something. Richard started jogging, his breath making clouds in the cold air. He ran without any destination in mind, just trying to outrun the feeling that had settled over him since yesterday. But you can't really outrun yourself. Wherever you go, there you are, still carrying all the same thoughts and feelings. After about 40 minutes, he found himself in a part of the city he didn't usually visit. The buildings here were older, smaller. The streets were narrower. This was the kind of neighborhood where people actually knew their neighbors, where kids played in the street and families sat on stoops in the summer. It felt more real somehow than the gleaming towers of his usual world. He slowed to a walk, catching his breath. His legs were tired, and he realized he'd run further than he intended. That's when he noticed the building on the corner. It was a community center, old brick with painted windows showing Christmas decorations. Through the front windows, he could see people inside. Lots of people. Families sitting at long tables. Volunteers serving food. Kids running around playing. Richard stopped walking. He stood there on the sidewalk, just watching through the window. The scene inside looked chaotic in the best way. Nothing like the quiet perfection of his penthouse. This was messy and loud and full of life. An older woman was laughing so hard at something that she had to wipe tears from her eyes. A teenage boy was showing another kid something on his phone, both of them grinning. Volunteers moved between tables carrying plates of food and pitchers of drinks. He felt something, uncomfortable twist in his chest, envy. He was envious of these people who probably had a fraction of his money but somehow had figured out something he'd completely missed. They had each other. They had community. They had somewhere to belong on Christmas Day. He stood there longer than he meant to, watching this world through the window like looking at a life he wasn't part of. A life that seemed impossibly far away from where he'd ended up. Then he felt the tug on his jacket. Richard looked down and there was a little girl, maybe 7 or 8 years old. She had dark curly hair escaping from under a red knit hat. Her brown eyes looked up at him with complete openness, no fear or hesitation. Kids look at adults that way sometimes before the world teaches them to be cautious. "Are you alone?" she asked. The question was so direct, so simple, that Richard didn't know how to answer. Was he alone? Technically, he was standing by himself on a sidewalk. But the bigger question behind her words felt too complicated to answer. "I was just taking a walk," he said. "On Christmas?" The little girl tilted her head. "Do you have somewhere to go for Christmas dinner?" "I'll probably just go home," Richard said. "But that's sad," the girl said matter-of-factly. "Nobody should be alone on Christmas. That's like the whole point. Everyone's supposed to be together." Before Richard could respond, a woman appeared in the doorway of the community center. She was probably in her mid-30s, wearing jeans and a sweater with a volunteer name tag. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail and she looked tired but kind. "Lily," she called. "What did I tell you about running outside without your coat?" The little girl turned. "But Mom, this man is alone on Christmas. Can he come eat with us?" The woman walked over and Richard could see the apology already forming on her face. "I'm so sorry," she said. "My daughter has no filter. She invites everyone to everything." "It's fine," Richard said, feeling suddenly awkward in his expensive running gear, very aware of how out of place he must look in this neighborhood. "Are you really alone?" the little girl Lily asked again. "Because we have lots of food. Grandma Rose made like 100 rolls, and there's turkey and ham and these potato things that are really good. Lily, he probably has his own plans," her mother said gently. "No, I don't," Richard heard himself say. The words came out before he could think about them. "I mean, I was just going to head home." The woman looked at him more carefully then, really looked at him, and he wondered what she saw. A rich guy slumming it in a poor neighborhood? A lonely person who somehow ended up standing outside a community center on Christmas? Whatever she saw, her expression softened. "Well," she said slowly, "we're serving Christmas dinner to anyone who needs a meal today. That's kind of the whole point of this place. Everyone's welcome, and see?" Lily grabbed his hand with both of hers. "You have to come now. Mom said everyone's welcome and you're everyone." Richard looked at the little girl's hopeful face, then at her mother's patient smile, then back through the window at the chaotic warmth inside. Every logical part of his brain said this was a bad idea. He didn't belong here. These weren't his people. This wasn't his world. He should politely decline, run back to his penthouse, and order delivery from some expensive restaurant that was open on Christmas. But standing there in the cold, with this child holding his hand and looking at him like his presence mattered, something in him shifted. Or maybe something that had been locked up tight for too long finally cracked open just a little bit. "Okay," he said, "if you're sure it's all right." Lily's face lit up like he'd just given her the best Christmas present ever. "Yes, come on." She pulled him toward the door and her mother followed, shaking her head but smiling. "I'm Anna, by the way," she said as they walked. "And you've met Lily, who apparently adopted you in the last 2 minutes." "Richard," he said, "and I appreciate the invitation. I know it's a bit unusual." "This place is all about unusual," Anna said, opening the door. "You'll fit right in." The warmth hit him first. Not just the temperature, though it was much warmer inside than the cold street, but the warmth of noise and life and people. Christmas music played from somewhere. Conversations overlapped each other. Kids laughed and shouted. The smell of food made his stomach remind him that he hadn't eaten breakfast. Lily pulled him further inside, past tables full of families, past decorations that were clearly handmade by children, past a small Christmas tree that looked nothing like his perfect one at home. This tree was lopsided and over-decorated, with paper ornaments and popcorn strings and what looked like decades of collected decorations all crammed onto it at once. "You can sit with us," Lily announced, pulling him toward a table where an older woman sat. "Grandma Rose, this is Richard. He was alone on Christmas, so I invited him." The grandmother looked up with eyes that had probably seen a lot of life. She studied Richard for a moment, and he had the distinct feeling she could see right through his expensive running gear to whatever was underneath. But her face broke into a warm smile. "Well then, Richard, welcome," she said. "Any friend of Lily's is family here. Though I should warn you, this one makes friends with everyone from stray cats to the mailman." "It's true," Lily said proudly, pulling out a chair for him. "I'm very friendly." Richard sat down, feeling more out of place than he'd felt in years. He ran companies. He sat in boardrooms with powerful people. He'd given speeches to thousands. But sitting at this table in a community center, surrounded by strangers celebrating Christmas together, he felt completely lost. Anna sat down across from him. "Have you been in the neighborhood long?" she asked, and he appreciated that she was trying to make conversation, to help him feel less awkward. "No, I was just jogging," Richard admitted. "I live uptown. I just sort of ended up here." "Well, sometimes we end up exactly where we need to be," Grandma Rose said, and there was something in the way she said it that made Richard think she meant more than just physical location. A volunteer came by with plates of food, and suddenly Richard had more food in front of him than he'd eaten in weeks. Turkey, ham, mashed potatoes, green beans, rolls, cranberry sauce. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't from a trendy restaurant, but when he took the first bite, surrounded by the noise and warmth of this place, it tasted better than any expensive meal he'd had in his penthouse. Lily chattered away beside him, telling him about her school, her teacher, her best friend who moved away, her plan to have 17 pets when she grew up. She talked like they'd known each other forever, like there was no difference between them at all, and slowly, as Richard sat there eating Christmas dinner in a community center with complete strangers, something inside him began to thaw. Just a little. Just enough to wonder if maybe, just maybe, he'd been wrong about everything. Richard had never felt more out of place in his entire life, and somehow that was exactly what he needed. Around him, the community center buzzed with life. Kids ran between tables despite their parents' half-hearted warnings to slow down. Someone had dropped a plate and 3 people rushed to help clean it up, all of them laughing about it. An older man was telling a story at the next table, his hands waving dramatically while everyone leaned in to listen. This was nothing like the controlled, quiet Christmas he'd imagined having in his penthouse. "So," Anna said from across the table, passing him a basket of rolls, "what do you do, Richard?" It was a simple question, the kind people ask when they first meet, but Richard froze. What should he say? That he ran a tech company? That he was a CEO? That his net worth was probably more than everyone in this room combined? Somehow saying any of that felt wrong, like it would build a wall between him and these people who were being so kind to him. "I work in technology," he said finally. Vague but true. "Oh, like computers and stuff?" Lily asked through a mouthful of mashed potatoes. "Lily, don't talk with your mouth full," Anna said automatically. Sorry, but does he? Do you work with computers? Something like that, Richard said, taking a roll from the basket. It was homemade, still warm, and when he bit into it, he understood why Lily had mentioned Grandma Rose making 100 of them. It was better than anything his housekeeper had ever made. That must be interesting, Grandma Rose said, and Richard got the feeling she saw right through his vague answer, but she didn't push. This one, she gestured to Lily, wants to be a veterinarian, or an astronaut, or a baker. It changes every week. This week I want to be a veterinarian astronaut baker, Lily said proudly, so I can take care of space dogs and make them birthday cakes. Richard found himself smiling. Actually smiling. That sounds like an ambitious career plan. I believe in dreaming big, Lily said with complete seriousness. A man in an apron approached their table carrying a pitcher of juice. He looked to be in his 60s with gray hair and tired but happy eyes. How's everyone doing over here? Need refills. We're good, Mr. Peterson, Anna said. This is Richard. He's joining us for dinner. Welcome, welcome, Mr. Peterson said, shaking Richard's hand with a grip that showed he'd worked with his hands his whole life. Any friend of this family is welcome here. These ladies basically run this place, you know. Don't know what we'd do without them. We don't run it, Anna protested. We just volunteer. Every single holiday for 3 years, Mr. Peterson said. And most weekends too. Running it, helping, whatever you want to call it. This center wouldn't be here without folks like Anna and her mother. Richard looked at Anna with new eyes. She worked here regularly. You volunteer a lot? He asked. Anna shrugged, looking a bit embarrassed. It helps us as much as we help anyone else. After my husband died, this place became like our second home. Or maybe our first home. The one we actually live in is pretty small. There was no self-pity in her voice when she mentioned her husband. Just fact, just life. Richard felt something tighten in his chest. This woman who'd lost her husband, who was raising a daughter and caring for her mother, spent her free time helping others. I'm sorry, he said. About your husband. Thank you, Anna said. It's been 3 years. It doesn't hurt quite as much as it used to, and we found this place, which gave us somewhere to put all that sadness into something good.
Right, Lily?
Right, Lily said. Daddy would have liked it here. He liked helping people. He did, Grandma Rose said softly, reaching over to squeeze Lily's hand. Richard sat there, his expensive running gear suddenly feeling like a costume. These people had real problems, real loss, real struggles, and yet here they were, spending their Christmas serving food to strangers and making everyone feel welcome. What had he been doing? Sitting in his penthouse, feeling sorry for himself? Can I ask you something? Lily said suddenly, turning to Richard with that direct way kids have of just saying what they're thinking. Sure, Richard said. Why were you really alone on Christmas? Don't you have a family? Lily, Anna started, but Richard held up his hand. It's okay, he said. It's a fair question. He looked at Lily's open, curious face. I have a son and a daughter. They're grown up now. They live far away. But don't they want to see you on Christmas? The question hit harder than it should have. I think, Richard said slowly, I didn't spend enough time with them when they were growing up. I was always working, so now we're not as close as we should be. That's sad, Lily said simply. Yeah, Richard agreed. It is. But you could call them, Lily suggested. My mom says it's never too late to tell someone you love them. Anna looked mortified. Lily, that's enough. You're being nosy. I'm not being nosy. I'm being helpful. There's a difference. Despite himself, Richard laughed. A real laugh, the kind that surprised him. When was the last time he'd laughed like that? You know what, Lily? You're absolutely right. It's never too late. A volunteer came by asking for help in the kitchen and Anna excused herself. Grandma Rose followed, leaving Richard alone with Lily, who immediately started telling him about her school's Christmas play where she'd been a sheep. I had to say ba 17 times, she explained. I counted. And I had to wear this itchy costume, but Mom said I was the best sheep in the whole play. I bet you were, Richard said, and he meant it. Do you want to play cards? Lily asked. Grandma Rose taught me this game called Rummy. It's really fun. I don't know how to play, Richard admitted. Lily's eyes went wide. You don't know Rummy? How is that possible? You're so old, Lily. Anna called from across the room, somehow hearing even over all the noise. I mean, you're very mature, Lily corrected quickly. which somehow made it worse and better at the same time. Richard laughed again. It's okay. I am pretty old. And somehow I never learned to play rummy. Well, today's your lucky day, Lily announced, pulling a worn deck of cards from her pocket. I'm an excellent teacher. For the next hour, Richard learned to play rummy from a 7-year-old who took the teaching very seriously. She explained the rules with great patience, corrected his mistakes gently, and cheered when he won his first hand like he'd just won the lottery. Around them, the community center continued its cheerful chaos. Someone started singing Christmas carols and soon half the room joined in. The singing wasn't professional or even particularly good, but it was heartfelt. Richard found himself humming along, not quite singing, but almost. Mr. Peterson stopped by again, this time sitting down in Anna's empty chair. So, Richard, Anna tells me you just wandered in from a Christmas jog? Something like that, Richard said, playing a card that Lily immediately told him was a mistake. Well, you picked the right place to wander into, Mr. Peterson said. This center has been serving this neighborhood for 40 years. We do meals twice a week plus holidays, job training programs, after-school care, ESL classes, little bit of everything. That's impressive, Richard said, and he meant it. It's necessary, Mr. Peterson said with a shrug. This neighborhood, people don't have a lot. But they have each other. That's what this place is really about, giving people somewhere to belong. Somewhere to belong. The words echoed in Richard's head. When was the last time he felt like he belonged somewhere? It must take a lot of funding to keep a place like this running, Richard said. Mr. Peterson's face grew more serious. That's our biggest challenge. We run on donations and grants, and it's always tight. Actually, he lowered his voice. Between you and me, we're not sure we can keep the doors open much longer. The building needs major repairs. Our biggest donor passed away last year. We're doing everything we can, but... He trailed off, looking around the room with such love and worry that Richard felt it in his own chest. That would be devastating, Richard said quietly. For the neighborhood. For everyone, Mr. Peterson agreed. But we'll figure something out. We always do. Anyway, enough sad talk on Christmas. How about some pie? Rose made her famous apple pie. As Mr. Peterson walked away, Richard looked around the room with different eyes. This place was struggling. This place that was feeding dozens of families, that was bringing people together, that had welcomed him without question, might close. Anna returned with slices of pie, and Lily immediately started eating hers with enthusiasm. Richard took a bite of his. It was perfect. Simple and homemade and perfect. Your mother is an amazing baker, he told Anna. She is, Anna agreed. She used to have her own bakery, actually. Before she got older and had to sell it, now she just bakes for fun and to feed half the neighborhood. I can taste the love, Richard said, and then immediately felt embarrassed. When had he started saying things like that? But Anna just smiled. She says that's the secret ingredient. They sat there eating pie, and Richard realized something strange. He was happy. Actually, genuinely happy. Not the artificial happiness of closing a business deal or seeing good quarterly numbers. Real happiness. The kind that comes from being around people who see you as a person, not a bank account or a business opportunity. Lily finished her pie and leaned against him, yawning. I'm sleepy, she announced. Christmas dinner coma, Anna said with a smile. It hits hard. Richard looked down at the little girl who was practically falling asleep against his shoulder. This child who'd seen him standing alone outside and refused to let him stay alone. This child who'd dragged him into warmth and noise and belonging without knowing anything about him. Thank you, he said quietly to Anna. For letting me crash your Christmas. Thank you for staying, Anna said. Lily has a gift for finding people who need to be found. I think you needed this as much as we needed you here. Richard wanted to argue. To say he didn't need anything, that he was fine, that this was just a random nice gesture on a lonely day. But sitting there in that warm, noisy community center with pie crumbs on his plate and a sleepy child leaning against him, he couldn't lie. She was right. He'd needed this more than he'd needed anything in years. Richard couldn't stop thinking about the community center. Days passed after Christmas, then weeks, and still his mind kept returning to that afternoon. To Lily's direct questions, to Anna's quiet strength, to Grandma Rose's warm smile, to the feeling of belonging somewhere, even if just for a few hours. He tried to go back to normal. Board meetings, conference calls, reviewing quarterly projections, But normal felt different now. His penthouse felt emptier. His successes felt hollower. He'd sit in his office looking at spreadsheets and suddenly remember the taste of homemade apple pie or the sound of Lily's laugh. It was ridiculous. He was a grown man, a CEO of a major company. One afternoon at a community center shouldn't have affected him this much. But it had. On a Tuesday evening 3 weeks after Christmas, Richard found himself driving back to that neighborhood. He told himself he was just checking in, just making sure they were okay. It had nothing to do with the fact that he'd felt more alive in those few hours than he had in years. The community center looked different in January. Less festive, more worn. The Christmas decorations were gone, showing the cracks in the walls and the water stains on the ceiling that holiday cheer had hidden. But through the windows he could see people inside. A class of some kind was happening. He parked and sat in his car for a moment, suddenly nervous. What was he doing here? They'd been kind on Christmas because that's what you do on Christmas. That didn't mean they wanted some rich guy showing up randomly on a Tuesday. But before he could talk himself out of it, he saw Lily. She was looking out the window, and when she saw his car, her whole face lit up. She started waving frantically, jumping up and down. Then she disappeared from the window, and seconds later the door burst open and she ran out. "Richard, you came back." She crashed into him as he got out of the car, hugging him around the waist. "I told Mom you'd come back." She said maybe, but I knew you would. Anna appeared in the doorway, and even from a distance Richard could see her surprise. "Richard? Is everything okay?" "Everything's fine," he said, suddenly feeling foolish. "I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd stop by." "I hope that's all right. It's perfect," Lily said. "We're doing ESL class right now." "That's English as a second language," she explained seriously. "I help sometimes." "Do you want to help?" "Lily, I'm sure Richard has other things to do," Anna said. But she was smiling. "Actually," Richard heard himself say, "I don't. I'd be happy to help if you need it." Anna studied his face for a moment, and he wondered what she saw. Whatever it was, she nodded. "Come on in then. We can always use extra hands." The ESL class was being taught by a volunteer named Mrs. Chen, a retired school teacher with infinite patience. About 15 adults sat at tables with workbooks practicing English. Some were clearly struggling, sounding out words carefully. Others were more advanced, writing full sentences. "Richard, this is Mrs. Chen," Anna introduced him. "Mrs. Chen, this is Richard. He'd like to help if we can use him." Mrs. Chen looked him up and down, and Richard had the distinct feeling he was being evaluated. "Can you read?" she asked bluntly. "Yes," Richard said, caught off guard. "Can you be patient?" "I think so." "Then you're hired," Mrs. Chen said. "Go sit with Miguel over there. He's working on pronunciation. Just read to him slowly and help him sound out words. Think you can do that?" "I can try," Richard said. Miguel was a man probably in his 50s with weathered hands and kind eyes. He looked nervous when Richard sat down next to him. "Hi, I'm Richard," he said. "I'm going to help you practice, if that's okay." Miguel nodded. "My English, it is not so good," he said carefully. "That's okay. That's why we're practicing," Richard said, picking up the workbook. "Let's just take it slow." For the next hour, Richard worked with Miguel, sounding out words, practicing pronunciation, helping him understand idioms that made no logical sense even to native speakers. It was harder than he expected. Teaching something you've known your whole life to someone, just learning it requires patience he didn't know he had. But Miguel was so determined, so grateful for every small correction, that Richard found himself invested in his success. When Miguel finally nailed a particularly difficult phrase, they both grinned like they'd won something important. "Good job," Richard said. "Good job to you too," Miguel said in careful English. "You are a good teacher." "I don't know about that," Richard said, but he felt absurdly pleased anyway. After the class ended, Miguel shook his hand firmly. "Thank you," he said. "You come back, yes?" "Yeah," Richard said. "I'll come back." The students filed out and Anna started stacking chairs with Lily's help, which mostly consisted of Lily talking nonstop while occasionally moving a chair. "Can I help?" Richard asked. "You don't have to," Anna said. "You already helped with the class." "I want to," Richard said, and he realized it was true. They worked together in comfortable silence, occasionally interrupted by Lily sharing some story from her day. Grandma Rose appeared from the kitchen with cookies, because apparently she was always baking something, and they took a break to eat them while sitting on the stacked chairs. "So," Anna said, "what made you come back? I didn't think we'd see you again." Richard thought about how to answer. The truth felt too vulnerable, but looking at Anna's open, curious face, he decided vulnerable might be okay. "I couldn't stop thinking about this place," he admitted, "about how I felt when I was here on Christmas. I haven't felt that way in a long time. Like I was actually part of something real." Anna nodded slowly. "I know that feeling. That's why we keep coming back too. After my husband died, everything felt fake and wrong. But here, people are just genuine. No pretense. Just people trying to help each other get through life." "How did he die?" Richard asked gently. "If you don't mind me asking." "Construction accident," Anna said. "Wrong place, wrong time. 1 minute he was there and then he wasn't. He was a good man. The kind of man who would have loved this place." "He would have loved it because you love it," Grandma Rose said. "And because Lily loves it. That's all he ever wanted, for you two to be happy." Lily leaned against her mother. "I miss Daddy," she said quietly. "Me too, baby," Anna said, putting her arm around her daughter. Every single day, Richard felt like an intruder on this moment of family grief. But then Lily looked at him and smiled. "But then we met new people like Richard. And that's good too. Daddy would have liked Richard. How do you know?" Richard asked, genuinely curious. "Because you're nice and you help people and you're trying to be better," Lily said with the simple wisdom of children. "That's what Daddy was like." The words hit Richard harder than they should have. You're trying to be better. Was he? Maybe he was. Maybe that's exactly what he was trying to do by coming back here. "Mr. Peterson mentioned the center might close," Richard said, changing the subject because Lily's words had affected him too much. "Is that true?" Anna's face fell. "We're trying not to think about it," she said. "But yeah, it's bad. The building needs a new roof. The heating system is dying. We owe back taxes on the property. Without major funding, we'll have to close by summer." "How much would you need?" Richard asked. "Too much," Anna said. "Like several $100,000 too much. We've applied for every grant we can find. We've had fundraisers. But it's never enough." Richard's mind was already working. Several $100,000? That was nothing to him. He could write a check right now and barely notice it missing from his account. But something told him that wasn't the right way to handle this. These people had pride. They wouldn't want charity from some rich guy who showed up out of nowhere. What if someone wanted to help? He asked carefully. "What would that look like?" "Honestly," Anna said, "I don't know. We'd take any help we could get. But most people don't want to invest in a neighborhood like this. It's not profitable. It's not glamorous. It's just necessary. Sometimes necessary is more important than profitable," Richard said. Anna looked at him curiously. "You sound like you understand business." "A little," Richard said vaguely. Over the next few weeks, Richard became a regular at the community center. He came every Tuesday for ESL class. Then he started coming on Thursdays when they did after-school tutoring. Then Saturdays when they served lunch. He helped Miguel practice his English until Miguel could hold full conversations. He tutored middle school kids in math. He served food. He stacked chairs. He did all the unglamorous work that kept the center running. And slowly he got to know the people. There was Diego, who worked 3 jobs to support his family. There was Mrs. Park, who'd come from Korea 40 years ago and still struggled with English but made the best kimchi Richard had ever tasted. There was Jerome, a veteran who came to the center because it was the only place he didn't feel alone. These people weren't success stories in the traditional sense. They weren't closing business deals or making 6 figures, but they were surviving, fighting, helping each other. They were real in a way Richard's business world had never been. Lily attached herself to him like glue. She'd wait for him every Tuesday, running up to hug him when he arrived. She'd talk his ear off about school and her friends and her dreams. She'd ask him to help with her homework and teach her card games and listen to her practice her reading. And Richard, who'd barely known his own grandchildren, found himself looking forward to these moments with Lily more than anything else in his week. "You're good with her," Anna said one evening as they watched Lily play with some other kids. "She's an easy kid to be good with," Richard said. "That's true," Anna said, "but it's more than that. You actually care. I can tell." Richard didn't know what to say to that. Did he care? When had that happened? When had this little girl and her mother and this whole community center become the thing he cared about most? I've been thinking, Anna said, about what you said about helping. With the center. Richard's heart beat faster. Yeah, I did some research, Anna said, and there was something in her voice. Something that told him she'd figured something out. Richard Thornton. CEO of Thornton Tech, that's you, isn't it? Richard felt caught, exposed. Yes, he admitted. Why didn't you tell us? Because I didn't want to be that guy here, Richard said. I wanted to just be Richard. Not Richard the CEO, just Richard who helps with ESL class and stacks chairs and plays cards with Lily. Anna was quiet for a moment. I get that, she said finally. I do. But Richard, if you want to help save this place, we need more than just another volunteer. We need someone who actually has the resources to make a difference. I want to help, Richard said, but I don't want to just throw money at it and walk away. That's what the old me would have done. Then don't, Anna said. Be the new you. The one who shows up every week and cares about the people here. But also be the guy who has the means to keep this place alive. Richard looked at the community center, at the worn furniture and cracked walls, at the people inside who needed this place. At Lily, who'd changed his life just by refusing to let him be alone on Christmas. Okay, he said. Let's talk about what this place really needs. 6 months after a little girl invited him to Christmas dinner, Richard sat in his company's boardroom, presenting something he'd never imagined he'd present. A proposal to create a corporate foundation dedicated to supporting community centers. The Martinez Family Center would be the pilot program. His board members looked at him like he'd lost his mind. Let me get this straight, said Helen, his CFO. You want to commit $5 million annually to community centers? That's not exactly aligned with our core business strategy. Actually, Richard said calmly, it's exactly aligned with our values, or at least what our values should be. We make technology that connects people, but we've forgotten about the people who need connection the most. He clicked to the next slide, showing photos of the community center. Kids in after-school programs, adults in ESL classes, families at holiday dinners. He saw the surprise on his board members' faces. This wasn't the Richard Thornton they knew. That Richard only cared about profit margins and market share. This center serves over 500 people a week, Richard continued. It provides meals, education, job training, childcare. It's the heart of its neighborhood, and it's about to close because it can't afford basic repairs. We can change that. Not just for this one center, but for dozens like it across the city. Richard, said Tom, one of his oldest board members, I appreciate the sentiment, but our shareholders expect returns on investment. How does this generate revenue? Richard had expected this question. The old him would have had a slick answer about tax benefits and good PR. But the new him told the truth. It doesn't, he said simply. Not in dollars. But it generates something more valuable. It generates community, hope, opportunity, and yes, it's the right thing to do. When did we stop thinking that mattered? There was silence in the room. Then Helen spoke up. You've changed, she said. It wasn't a criticism. Just an observation, yes, Richard agreed. I have. The vote was close, but it passed. Richard walked out of that boardroom feeling lighter than he had in years. He immediately called Anna. We got it, he said. The board approved the foundation. He could hear the emotion in Anna's voice. Richard, I don't know what to say. This is going to change everything. It already has, Richard said. But the foundation was only the beginning. Richard had also made another decision. He'd promoted his ambitious VP to CEO. Michael was hungry, talented, and ready. He'd do a great job. Meanwhile, Richard would become executive chairman, a role with fewer daily responsibilities and more flexibility. His former colleagues thought he was crazy. You're stepping down in your prime, they said. You could run this company for another 20 years. But Richard didn't want to run a company for 20 years. He wanted to live. Actually live. For the first time in decades, he wanted to be present in his life instead of just successful in his career. The first thing he did with his new schedule was show up at the community center on a Monday morning, not to volunteer but to meet with contractors. With the foundation's funding, they could do serious renovations. New roof, new heating system, fresh paint, updated kitchen facilities, and expansion for more classroom space. Lily followed him around like a shadow as he discussed plans with the contractors, asking a million questions and offering suggestions that were adorable if not always practical. Can we get a slide inside? She asked. For emergency escapes? I don't think we need emergency slides, Richard said, trying not to laugh. But what if there's a flood? Or dragons? If there are dragons, I think we have bigger problems than needing a slide. Lily considered this seriously. That's true. Dragons can fly, so a slide wouldn't really help. Anna walked over, coffee in hand, shaking her head with a smile. Lily, let Richard work. I am helping, Lily protested. She is, Richard said. She's keeping me grounded in reality. Apparently, we need a dragon contingency plan. Obviously, Anna said with mock seriousness, always prepare for dragons. As the contractors got to work, Richard found himself at the center almost every day. Not because he had to be there, but because he wanted to be. He painted walls alongside volunteers. He helped move furniture. He learned everyone's name and their stories. He met Carlos, who'd been laid off from his factory job and was retraining for a new career. He met Yuki, a young mother taking ESL classes while her daughter played in the new childcare space. He met Benjamin, a teenager who came to the center after school because home wasn't always safe. These were real people with real struggles, and somehow they'd become his people. His community. The thing he didn't know he'd been missing his whole life. One afternoon, Lily found him sitting on the front steps taking a break from painting. She plopped down next to him, her own hands covered in paint from helping. Richard, she said, yeah. Are you happy now? The question was so direct, so Lily. Richard thought about it. Was he happy? He'd taken a step back from the career he'd built his entire identity around. He'd spent millions on a community center. He spent his days doing manual labor and tutoring kids instead of making business deals. Yeah, he said, surprised by how true it was. I really am. Good, Lily said. You were sad before. On Christmas. I could tell. You're pretty smart, you know that? Mom says I'm observant, Lily said. That's a fancy word for nosy. Richard laughed, that genuine laugh that had become more common in recent months. Can I ask you something else? Lily said, always. Are you going to stay? Like, keep coming here? Because some people help for a little while and then they leave. And I don't want you to leave. Richard felt his throat tighten. I'm not going anywhere, he promised. I like it here. With you and your mom and everyone. This is where I want to be. Good, Lily said, leaning against him. Because you're like my uncle now. My Uncle Richard. He'd never been an uncle to anyone. He'd barely been a father. But sitting there with paint on his clothes and this little girl leaning against him, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. He felt needed. Not for his money or his business acumen or his connections, just for being himself. That evening, after the center closed, Richard stayed to help Anna and Grandma Rose clean up. It had become their routine. As they worked, Anna brought up something she'd been thinking about. You know, she said, you should call your kids. Richard stopped sweeping. What? Your kids? David and Lisa, right? You should call them. Actually call them. Have a real conversation. I don't think they'd want to hear from me, Richard said. Why not? Anna asked. Because you weren't there when they were growing up? Richard, that's exactly why you should call. You can't change the past, but you can change what happens next. It's been so long, Richard said. I wouldn't know what to say. Start with the truth, Grandma Rose said from the kitchen doorway. Tell them you were wrong. Tell them you want to do better. Tell them you miss them. Kids need to hear that from their parents, even when they're grown. That night, Richard sat in his penthouse, phone in hand, staring at his son's number. He'd texted David plenty over the years. Quick messages about business or holidays. But an actual phone call? It had been months. Maybe years. He pressed call before he could talk himself out of it. David answered on the third ring. Dad, is everything okay? Of course, he'd assumed something was wrong. When was the last time Richard had called just to talk? Everything's fine, Richard said. I just wanted to hear your voice. There was a pause. Really? Really? I know I haven't been good at this, at being a father, but I'm trying to be better. And I wanted you to know that I think about you all the time.